The Land Rover Discovery, a go anywhere, do anything, carry everything and everyone type of car. It's built on the D7U platform, which is shared by its posher siblings, the Range Rover Sport and the even bigger Range Rover. The lack of Range Rover badge certainly brings the price down though, but does it also bring down the quality with it? Let's find out, shall we? My name's Tom, and you're watching Paragon Cars. Let's go. Before we start, please like, subscribe and hit the bell if you'd like us to keep bringing you this content. Oh, and don't forget to follow our socials for updates on our stock as well. Links in the description below. Now, this new Land Rover might only have a 2-litre engine, but thanks to its new unionised architecture and use of aluminium, it weighs nearly half a tonne less than its predecessor. Plus, this 2-litre diesel actually puts out decent power due to multiple snails under the bonnet. Those turbos help this engine output 240 brake and a much needed 500 Nm of torque. It may be half a tonne lighter, but it's still a porker at 2.1 tonnes. Even with all that weight, 0 to 60 is dealt with in 8.3 seconds, which is adequate for everyday use, but what about something more realistic? Let's see how this Disco does on the 30 to 70 sprint. Now, for some reason, Draggy didn't want to play ball today, so I couldn't manage to get a valid run. I did plenty of takes though, and this one at 8.17 seconds was bang in the middle of all the results I got. We do these runs in the same place, and when they do come back valid, it says the ground is flat, so I wouldn't worry too much about the slope reading on this one. Anyway, in terms of time, 8.17 seconds is of course no rocket ship, but it's perfectly zippy enough. Plus, the response of the engine is actually pretty nice, making it feel faster than it actually is. Inside, the Discovery is actually surprisingly nice. The layout is, unsurprisingly, very similar to a Range Rover. Big comfy seats with fold-away armrests and a very familiar looking steering wheel are the first things you notice. But look closer and there's some pretty cool things in here. First off, you'll notice the open button on the climate controls. Initially you might think it opens a glove box, but it actually opens a secret little cubby space behind the HVAC controls. There's even another sort of hidden space under the cup holders. Forget the front though, as the rear is what the Disco is about. It's got heaps of legroom/headroom and plenty of features including USB ports and your own armrest with cup holders. You can use the electric controls at the side of your seat to either recline, or you can use them to get to the third row. Now, in most SUVs, this is a space for people with no legs. However, the Discovery actually has room for adults back here. And that's not just for short journeys, they can sit fairly comfortably over a course of about 2 hours. There's even a well-placed grab handle, making that awkward shuffle to the back a fair bit easier. In terms of features, you have a cup holder either side, and some storage with a neatly tucked away USB port. The fact there's a sunroof right above really helps the cabin feel less cramped as well. The boot is something impressive though. Not only can you fold every seat down electrically, you even have this little platform that can actually hold up to 300 kilos. Perfect for picnics or just loading longer items in. In terms of space, there's 228 litres with all 7 seats up, and that's actually enough for a weekly shop. Then you have 1137 with 5 seats up, and a minivan sized 2406 litres with all seats down. Right, let's see if this Disco can dance. So, can a 2-litre engine really be powerful enough to take this 2.1 tonne SUV down the road? And keep in mind, because this has got the urban kit as well, I think it is probably more around the 2.2 tonne mark, especially with those big wheels. Well, so far, driving around town, it feels alright. You got 430 Newton meters of torque from pretty low down in the rev range, and that ZF 8-speed gearbox does do a good job of blending the gears together. Then in terms of suspension, going over the speed bumps back there, it does actually feel alright, even though we're riding on these absolutely massive urban wheels. In terms of parking, this is a big car, so it's not the easiest thing to park. And even though we've got all that steering lock, it still doesn't really let you get into a space in one go. does mean you're doing this a lot. Although thankfully the steering is pretty light. Actually feels slightly lighter than the Range Rover to me. Although that's probably not true. One thing I do like is this little rotary dial to get into gear. It's very quick to react, which is nice. And of course you've got a reverse camera anyway, so parking isn't that hard. Plus the parking sensors are pretty good in this. Okay, let's see what this thing is like coming out of a junction. Just give it half throttle. Yeah, responds pretty quick. It does go higher in the rev range than the 3 litre car does, but it doesn't really feel like it's struggling too much. I'm sure on the motorway that'll be a bit of a different story. Anyway, let's reset our trip computer to see what MPG we get on the motorway. This car claims to get over 40 miles per gallon, and for a car that weighs this much and isn't exactly the most aerodynamic thing in the world, I really don't think it's going to get that number. I think we might get about 38, maybe? But we'll have to see. Oh, one other thing you might have noticed is that it keeps saying the tow bar is not locked. That's because this car doesn't actually have a tow bar. It was removed when the Urban kit was put on, and it just hasn't been coded out the system yet. But coming around corners, this certainly feels like a big car. On a B road, the Range Rover Sport was quite dynamic, surprisingly dynamic actually, so it's going to be interesting to see if this hunkers down in the corners. Right, let's see how this Discovery handles a roundabout. I don't believe there's actually a sport mode in this, you've just got your 4x4 modes, but we can put the gearbox into S. And then I'm going to see if I can lower the car and turn the stability control off. Got paddles though, so we can control the gears ourselves. And one thing that becomes apparent is that it doesn't really like to be thrown around corners. It's got quite a lot of body roll, this car, but I mean that's expected. One thing that I'm impressed with is that the gearbox does respond fairly well. And for a car that's only got a 2 litre engine, it's not fast, but it does feel fast. Or, I mean, it feels torquey. For now though, we're going to go back into normal drive mode, put the DSC back on, where is it? There we are. And just see what she's like as a motorway cruiser, because that's where she's going to spend most of her time. Okay, so first off, there is a distinct lack of road noise coming from this car. And I don't know if it's the tyres or something, but this is a really quiet car to travel in. Plus the wind noise is pretty low as well. For a motorway cruiser, this car is, I mean, it's up there with some of the best cars I've driven. It's really comfortable. Seats get nice and low. There's plenty of adjustment with them as well. There's a lot of adjustment in the base, so you get a lot of under thigh support with this seat. Cruise control is easy to use. Really nothing to complain about so far. And because you've got a lot of low down grunt from this 2 litre engine, yes, it doesn't accelerate too fast, but it's not having to switch through the gears a lot just to maintain its speed. It just sits in 8th gear pretty much the whole time on the motorway. So it makes it feel like a much bigger engine than it actually is. Then visibility, it's actually not that great in this car. There's big windows and you get this big commanding driving position. Because you are so high up, it is actually quite hard to see in your blind spot. Thankfully, Land Rover have combated this by giving you a blind spot monitor that just tells you if there's anything in your blind spot, and it does work fairly well. Then in terms of interior quality, this is where you notice it is one level below a Range Rover. You don't get leather on the door sills, but you do get this pretty soft, squidgy material. And it still feels nice, you know, you've still got a big window ledge to rest your whole arm on. If not, you've still got another ledge down here. And you've got these big armrests that you can pull down as well. So it really doesn't feel any different to sit in compared to a Range Rover. The only thing you notice is a slight visual difference in interior quality. Then, if there were only 3 specs that I could choose for this car when I bought it, first thing is going to have to be a sound system. This Meridian system isn't even that good, to be honest. So the bass system is definitely going to be in need of an upgrade. And I think for a family car, if you are doing long journeys, it is something you're going to want to have. Next thing is going to be a panoramic roof. I don't know if this actually comes standard. I think it does on the HSE model, and I mean, you have to get it if you get a car this big. Otherwise, it's just going to be so dark for people in the 3rd row. Then the last thing is going to be that reverse camera. It is definitely needed for parking. Even though you've got parking sensors, it's nice to have that reassuring view out the back. And the thing is, sometimes, even though these parking sensors are good, they can miss something like a bollard, and you don't really want to hit one of those in your brand new Land Rover. Overall, as a package though, this is quite a rare car. I mean, to get 7 people in a car that can do proper off-roading, and oh yeah, 7 adults, not just 7 people. Things like an Audi SQ7 or a BMW X5 just don't have quite the same amount of room in the 3rd row that this car has. This is much more comparable to something like a Volvo XC90 than a Mercedes GLE or Audi Q7. Now, because our videos mainly consist of cars that are sort of 3-4 years or older, I thought I'd do something new when we're on the motorway and talk about the wear and tear. So, this car is 5 years old, and so far there is not much wear and tear to talk about. The only thing is going to be that piano black plastic, and this is the same on every single car that uses it, whether it be an S-Class or an Audi A1. For me, it just wears terribly because it scratches so easily. Manufacturers need to figure out a way of getting some sort of, I don't know, hard coating or replaceable coating maybe on this piano black plastic, because it just scratches so easily. And when the sun shines on it, you can see there's so many swirl marks, and it just means it doesn't look that good after a while. But everything else in the cabin works properly. Of course, apart from that tow bar, but that's, you know, not the car's fault. Which I have to say is fairly surprising considering this is a Land Rover. They're not known for their reliability scores. But even other things like interior rattles just don't exist in this. I'm very surprised. I thought riding on bigger wheels like this would really rattle the interior about. Oh, and that beeping, if you're wondering, is actually the car telling me that there is a speed camera coming up. The Range Rover Sport I reviewed a while ago did the same thing, and I couldn't figure out what it was doing, but then I realised later it was actually telling me that there was a speed camera. Quite a good feature if you ask me. Oh, one more thing, the steering and suspension on the motorway are sublime. Steering's nice and light still, stays dead straight, and that suspension really does have a Range Rover feel to it. After all, it is a very similar system. Anyway, how did we do in terms of miles per gallon? Well, we got 36. Looks like I was right. This thing isn't really going to get over 40 mpg unless you are in absolutely perfect conditions. And I know part of that can be caused by the body kit and the wheels, but they don't really have much of an effect in reality. As you can see though, it is still going up, so I do reckon on a long run you would get exactly 38 mpg, which, I know, it's not brilliant, but it's also perfectly livable in my mind. Anyway, let's see how this behemoth handles on a B-road, shall we? Alright, come on then, let's see how this thing handles. Let's get the traction off again. I don't know if the spacers are giving me more grip or something, but you can carry a surprising amount of pace around the corners. Thing is though, the car definitely holds you back, even when you got the DSC off. Look at that, I mean, up to 70 already. It's really not that bad. I'll have to double check whether this car was mapped or not, because the 30 to 70 time, I thought it was going to be a lot slower than it was. Got the gearbox in sports again. Responds nice and fast. Paddles are actually quite good fun to use as well. Look at nice. I mean, you have to do a lot of wheel twirling, but you know, you can go 40, 50 miles an hour around this corner. There's not really any chassis dynamics to talk of, but you know, it's not really what this car's about. The main thing is that it does it, and it does it safely and predictably, and it's doing that. You know, you don't want to get into a corner and then feel like the car's gonna go sideways on you or do something unpredictable. You know, this just has that bit of understeer for safety built into it. Quite similar to an Audi, really. Brakes feel pretty good as well. They're a little bit spongy, but I can see why they've done that. They've made it to be sort of comfortable, easy to drive. One other thing I noticed as well is that the throttle pedal is very much set to give you that feeling of torque. You can literally give it half throttle and it's basically just giving you max power. But even on faster roundabouts, it handles itself pretty well, I have to say. Okay, so the first thing you notice is that body roll. It does roll quite a lot, this car. And the second thing you notice is the size. This is a big boy. And hustling it down a B road is actually quite good fun. I mean, look, we're up to 60 miles an hour now. I'm going to slow down a bit for this big hump because, oh yeah, it really doesn't like that. Good thing I did. I think I would have ended up in the hedge otherwise. It is certainly not built as a track car, this thing. And you can feel the ESC trying to stop me from rolling over. It's quite funny to drive this. The weird thing is, there is something inherently satisfying about just hustling an absolutely massive car down a B road. Or down a road it really shouldn't be down. One other thing you can actually do to help you down a B road is tighten the bolsters on the seat. Usually that's a feature you only see in sporty BMWs or even sportier Audis and Mercedes. Surprisingly though, you can do it in a Land Rover Discovery. Bit of a strange feature to have on this car, but I'm thankful for it. It does hold you in your seat very well. Going around the tighter corners, went around that corner at nearly 40 miles an hour, and that's the speed limit already. You can genuinely get a bit of a move on down a B road in this thing. And because you're using all the performance this car can give, it's actually quite good fun. Come around this corner a little bit quicker, test the brakes out because people like to drive slowly in a 60 mile an hour limit. Yeah, it's a pretty good car to drive. Feels very solid. And it certainly doesn't ever surprise you. You know what you're going to get. It's going to be a bit of understeer, but yeah, it's really not that bad. It feels very safe.
And that says it all, really. Even when you're heavy on the throttle, this 2-litre engine still gives pretty good economy. The main thing for me, though, is how it drives, because, well, it really doesn't feel any different from a Range Rover. It's just as refined, as far as I can perceive at least, and still gives you that commanding and effortless driving experience. The only major difference was the lack of leather on the dash, but other than that, it's a cracking car for the money. Good off-road, good for the family, and genuinely enough room for 7 people. Anyway, as always, I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, give it a like, and why not subscribe, as not only can you see more videos like this, you can also see everything we have for sale. My name's Tom, and you've been watching Paragon Cars. I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.